Hello dear World of Warcraft friends, welcome back to a new video on my channel.
Tomorrow brings the next round of class tuning for patch 12.1. Blizzard had already announced this beforehand, and there are a total of 10 classes involved, some with multiple specs, all of which will be buffed, so there are zero nerfs but plenty of buffs, which is intended to tighten up class balance even more. Among them are Death Knight, Warrior, Warlock, Mage, Paladin, and so on and so forth, Hunter. We'll take a look at all of that in this video. Feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you don't want to miss any news, tips, or tricks. And with that, let's get started. Yes!
We can see here these are the classes that can expect buffs. Frost Death Knights,
Havoc and Vengeance, Demon Hunter, Resto Druids, Healing Evokers, Beast Mastery and Survival Hunters, Brewmaster Monks, Frost Mages, Retribution Paladins, Warlocks, and Warriors. This all goes live on Wednesday as always, and we start here with the Dead Knights. Here we see Frost. Aura abilities and melee damage are increased by 6%. On top of that, Obliterate gets an additional boost. It gets a total of 15%. Blizzard says overall that the Frost Decay is falling short of expectations, especially in raids. That's why these buffs are being added on top now, and I'd say that's pretty decent. Next we have Havoc Demon Hunter. O in O, it's a 3% increase that's being added. And for Vengeance Demon Hunter, the effectiveness of Mastery is increased by 24%, which ultimately results in more damage. So there are minor changes for many classes affecting 2 or 3 abilities. For some, like the Paladin, the tier set is being adjusted. But all in all, this should result in a pretty good damage increase. Here we see Resto Druids, where Blizzard says that in the end, Rejuvenation and Wild Growth feel very weak, especially in dungeons.
that's supposed to change. For one, the 4-piece set will increase the duration of Genesis to 8 instead of 4 seconds. Then we have Rejuvenation.
And this effect, if you stack Rejuvenation twice with the talent, 15% more healing. Wild Growth gives 10% more healing. Nature's Bounty reproduces 10% of regrowth's healing, down from 20%.
The broom that you can place on the ground heals 5 instead of 6 targets. And Everbloom heals for 48% of Life Bloom's final healing.
So all in all, these are buffs. But for example, because of the nerf to the bloom that you can place on the ground, Blizzard said Retrograde healing will be toned down a bit because otherwise it would be too strong. But all in all, these are buffs for Restoration Druids, which is definitely not a bad thing. We have Preservation Evoker. There we have several abilities included. Dream Simulacrum is now 40% instead of 30% as before. Living Flame heals for 20% more. And Verdant Embrace has 25% more healing. For the Beastmaster, Blizzard also says that especially the AoE damage and the cleave ability should get better, which especially helps in Mythic Plus. Helps out. Wild's Rushing now deals 300% increased damage when it hits more than 2 targets. Previously it was 200%. And also the cleave damage for Beast Cleave. The damage your pets deal to nearby enemies is now 70% of the damage instead of 55%. So that's pretty decent. For survival, we see the damage that the hunter himself deals, and the pet's damage is increased by 4%. That brings us to the mage, Frost in this case. Here, the main goal is to increase performance in Mythic Plus. The ice barrier absorbs 5% more. So here too, a bit more defense. Your Blizzard does 10% more damage.
The Torrent Splitting Ice deals 10% more damage to nearby enemies. So, in the end, for example, when you cast Ice Lance on an enemy, a second one still flies off as well. You get more damage from that. And the Isothermic Core increases the damage of Meteor by 25%. So mages can really look forward to that. We have the Brewmaster Monk. Overall, we see 3% more damage. Because I have to say, Brewmaster wasn't bad in terms of damage before either. It was more the survivability that caused problems compared to other tanks. But that's what we're seeing here now. Through your brews and the Celestial Infusion, you absorb 20% more damage. And especially if you keep that up all the time, especially the brews, here you get another 20% more absorb. That's definitely strong defensively. Will that be enough to make the Brewmaster the new top choice?
Probably not, but it does make him quite a bit stronger.
For Retribution Paladins, Blizzard has tweaked the tier set. Here we see 4-piece set. The damage against the main target is increased by 150. Against the secondary target, increased by 75. So with the 4-piece set, you do significantly more damage in both single target and 2-target situations. It gets interesting with the Warlocks, because all 3 specs are getting a whole bunch of buffs. For one, pets have been buffed. The Imp, the Sayad, the Fell Hunter, 350 more damage. For the Affliction Warlock, we see Unstable Affliction, 50 more damage, Black and Soul, 20 more. The Wrath of Nadreza, 35 more. The Shadow of Nadreza, 25 more. Agony, 20 more damage. Corruption, 15%. And if you play Hellcaller, this one I think it's called Wither, 10 more damage. So all in all, Affliction Warlocks can really look forward to some very strong buffs here. For Demonology Warlocks, it's a bit less. Shadowbolt does 35 more damage here. Demon Bolt does 30 more. The Imps do 20 more. The Felguard does 20 more damage. Demons that are summoned through this Dominion of Argus do 20 more. And the Fellhounds that you can summon through it also do 30 more damage. And then we have the Destro, the Destruction Warlock. Rain of Fire does 30 more damage. So that's purely an AoE thing. But all Warlock specs were actually doing pretty well in the raid. That's going to get even better now. And last but not least, we have the Protection Warrior. Here, just through the relevant talent, you now get 8% less magic damage instead of 6%. That was something where warriors were actually not so bad defensively, but they had some problems with magic damage. That should be toned down a bit with this. Yes, that's the class tuning we have received now. Next week there will be another one. So let's see what happens. What do you think? Which class do you think still needs a bit of love from Blizzard? Or which one should be nerfed? Feel free to write it in the comments. And with that, thanks for watching. See you in the next video and take care.